Welcome to the Change Life Destiny podcast, where healthcare is being reimagined one conversation at a time. We spotlight the people, innovations, and ideas moving us from sick care to self-care and from reactivity to true prevention. A place to connect, learn, and build a new future together. Get inspired at changelifedestiny.com. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Change Life Destiny podcast series. I'm Stephanie, your host, and today we're with Dr. Tyler LeBaron of Inhale H2. And to be really honest, I'm very excited for this conversation because I know very little about this product. So I can't wait to dive into the science and to the product and to find more out about the technology. But first, we would like to know more about you. So, Dr. Tyler, how did you find yourself in this space, in this healthcare space? And tell us a little bit about your story.
Yeah, so I've always been interested in health and wellness and longevity, actually, since elementary school. I remember learning that maybe sugar is not the best thing, and so I started eating that.
Wow, really? In elementary
Mhm.
school?
Yeah, so
That's
long
impressive.
time, and I've always been interested in sport performance and competitions, athletics, and things. I did that through high school. I still actually compete in different things. In fact, just yesterday or 2 days ago, they had what's called a 15-15 challenge. So you get on the treadmill and they
Okay.
put you at 15% incline and you run for 15 minutes and how far you can go, what's the total distance you can do.
Wow.
And so it's just a great overall test for endurance, cardiorespiratory fitness. Is pretty much your VO2 max of the test. And so you just can't hold on to the handrails, So
I would
I
not
was just
make
like,
it. I
yeah,
would not
no,
make it.
but you could put even 1 mile per hour or something. So you just barely go and you control the speed. You just go
Okay.
how far can you go in that 15 minutes?
Wow.
Um,
How far
Anyways,
did you go?
I ended up making 1.6 miles. So
Wow.
it's it actually I got $100. I won $100 for
Woohoo!
the little thing too. So that's cool. But I love competing. I love just trying to do the best I can for my mitochondria, for my overall health. And that's partly why exercise comes into this. And so it was actually in 2009 that I was introduced to this area of molecular hydrogen, right? Hydrogen gas,
Okay.
and its potential for mitochondrial health and for overall health. And it's interesting when you consider what are we even talking about, right? What is hydrogen? And if we go back to the periodic table of elements, we see hydrogen as number one. Hydrogen is that top periodic table, right? And that hydrogen can combine with a lot of things. It can combine with oxygen to form water, right? H2O. So it's combined with an oxygen, or it can combine with carbon to form hydrocarbons, right? Or it can combine with another hydrogen atom to form hydrogen gas. And we
Okay.
call that meaning two, dihydrogen or diatomic hydrogen, or just a molecule of hydrogen, which we call molecular hydrogen. And that's the chemical, or that's the species, that's the identity we're talking about. And I learned about this in 2009 when I was studying biochemistry, my undergrad degree at the time, and I was very fascinated by it. And there was some really interesting articles. There was one published in Nature Medicine, and Nature Medicine is a very high profile academic journal.
Okay.
And what the researchers did in this study is they induced a stroke model in a rat. So they took these rats, induced a stroke model, basically just cut the blood supply to the brain, and then let the blood go back again. And that obviously cause a lot of problems to the
Yeah,
brain.
I'd say so.
When they administered hydrogen gas, it dramatically prevented the brain damage. You can just visually look at the difference at the brain slices, and they
Uh-huh.
looked at them and they measured oxidative stress and other markers, and everything was dramatically improved by molecular hydrogen. Now,
Interesting. Okay.
this is important that there's a couple key things that they found in this article that are important. Number one, that hydrogen gas itself had therapeutic effects, and it was published in top journal, right? And this is just an animal study, but it was still very impressive. And another one though is hydrogen gas is explosive though above 4%,
Okay.
but in the study they only used 2% hydrogen, so
Okay.
it's not explosive. There's no risk of flammability as long as you're below 4%. So
Okay.
this now has real medical translatability, because if hydrogen gas could have this effect in a stroke model, could it also have powerful effects in a human model where it's also administered safely below 4%?
Okay. Got it.
So, as the research continued, more animal research continued confirming therapeutic biological effects, and then human studies shortly followed. And 10 years after that, there was a study in stroke patients
Mm.
using about 2% hydrogen gas, and they found that hydrogen gas outperformed standard drug treatment.
So is this
Mhm.
post-stroke?
Yeah, it was post-stroke.
Wow. Okay. Okay. Keep going.
Yeah, so post-stroke, it was like in this study, 2017, 50 subjects that are randomized, and half of them received standard treatment, the other half received molecular hydrogen
Uh-huh.
inhalation.
Uh-huh.
And when you compare the two, the hydrogen gas inhalation had improved performance on like the MRI signal intensities and some
Mm.
other rating scores that they used.
Wow.
So showing it does have translatable effects, maybe not as powerful as the animal studies, which is typical, but really showing it has translatable effects. And
Mhm.
these types of research have continued to progressing. But as I mentioned, I learned about this back in 2009. And so I
Mhm.
got excited, like I want to research this and understand, because hydrogen is so ubiquitous. It's everywhere. It's very easy to get hydrogen gas. You can just take water and you do electrolysis of water, which is
Mhm.
already H2O, and you can break apart that water molecule and you get the hydrogen gas, just pure
Wow.
hydrogen gas, and you can use that therapeutically. And that's
Okay.
essentially what is being done. That's how our product also works. So in so I was studying biochemistry, and I needed to do an internship for my biochemistry degree, and I wanted to research hydrogen gas. So I ended up going to Japan, where this research was really starting to go. And I went to Nagoya University,
Okay.
and I researched in the Department of Neurogenetics, and we looked at hydrogen gas at various cell signaling pathways. And that's when I could see with my own eyes the effects of hydrogen gas on cell signaling pathways and how it's really affecting the cells at that molecular level.
Wow.
And I was also able to get to know other top researchers in the field, especially those like involved in the mitochondria, and who are also interested in looking at molecular hydrogen as a therapeutic selective antioxidant for the mitochondria.
Okay.
And maybe just to talk about that a little bit, why it's so important, we know that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. It's like that produces all the ATP, the energy, like 90% of it. It produces most of the energy. And as we get older, or through environmental toxins and a number of other problems, our mitochondria can stop working as well, right? They become
Right.
compromised, or maybe we don't have as many of them. They start, and mitochondria also produce are the primary producers of free radicals, right? These little chemical species that cause oxidative stress, that cause
Right.
the inflammation, that cause all these problems. It's these free radicals that are produced by the mitochondria. But yet it's inside the mitochondria where these are happening. And so what we need is some sort of a molecule or something that can go into the mitochondria and can help reduce the amount of oxidative stress that's occurring. This is why hydrogen gas is being investigated in the very first place, is because hydrogen is the smallest molecule in the universe.
Okay.
It's neutral and nonpolar, so it can enter the mitochondria easier than anything else. At first, it can enter the cell membrane, and then it can enter the mitochondria. And if we just compare that to typical, I don't know, drugs or supplements, it's challenging for a lot of things to even get through the cell membrane,
Hmm.
because the cell membrane has this fatty acid lipid bilayer, right? That's what the lipids are. And that's why you have to have protein channels. You have to have specific ways or mechanisms to get a molecule into the cell. And then
Right.
once it's in the side of the cell, then you have to somehow direct it to the mitochondria, or like how is it actually going to get there? And then the mitochondria itself has this inner mitochondrial membrane, which is basically impermeable to almost everything except
So much
very
protection
specific
for
stress
our
hormones.
mitochondria. My goodness.
Yeah, it's because they are the powerhouses of our cell.
Right.
You have to really protect them. But that means that if something goes awry, it can be more challenging to protect them. Molecular hydrogen easily gets into the cell and can easily get into the mitochondria. And just as an analogy, what else do we know goes into the mitochondria really easily? Oxygen gas. It is oxygen that we consume, right? We are literally inhaling oxygen gas, and the mitochondria is using the oxygen gas as the oxidative power to make the energy, right? Is basically the fuel, right? Oxygen
Right.
is not fuel. Oxygen is the oxidizer to burn the fuel, right? So the
Mhm.
food that we eat is like the wood of a fire, right? You put all that stuff on. That's the carbohydrates, right?
Mhm.
That
Mhm.
in wood you have a carbon hydrogen bonds. It's the same idea, and then oxygen is that final oxidizer. So same thing with the mitochondria. We call them like little furnaces because they're literally burning all of that food stuff that we ingest, and it combines with oxygen.
Right.
Now, I just bring that up because we know, obviously, that oxygen gas easily gets through the cell membrane and into the mitochondria where it gets used. Hydrogen gas is a lot smaller than oxygen gas. Oxygen gas weighs 32 grams per mole, whereas hydrogen gas is only 2 grams per mole. And
Wow.
so hydrogen gas can get into the mitochondria easier than even oxygen can.
Wow. Okay.
And now when it's there, it can help to improve the function of the mitochondria. That's really what we're talking about. And if we improve the function of the mitochondria, then what are the benefits that are expected to be seen from this? To do that, we just have to think about, again, what are the benefits or purpose of the mitochondria? And we talked about one of them is that it produces energy, right? It
Mhm.
produces the ATP for our cells' needs. That's not just when you exercise, like if you're trying to sprint or run or like that 15-15 challenge I did earlier,
Yeah.
right? Of course, that's important, but even just clearing out cellular debris, our waste products. When we sleep at night, we're trying to get our brain to recover and repair, going through this autophagy where our
Mhm.
cells consume different organelles and get rid of that. All of that requires energy. And if you have a low energy, then you can't really do those functions. If you don't do those functions, you're going to start having more problems, right? DNA repair, it also requires energy. Maintain the cell membrane potential itself requires energy. ATP with the sodium potassium ATPase. There's so many of these things require energy. And if you get low in ATP levels, then it's going to start not doing important functions that it would do otherwise.
Got it.
Because it's very important to maintain high ATP levels. And just, it's interesting to think about this. When you sprint at your max exercise capacity, how low do your ATP levels actually go? Do they go so do you run out of energy because you just ran out of ATP? Is that the reason why? That's what we tend to think anyway. We tend to think we're going to run and we're out of energy, our ATP levels are gone. And it turns out that's not true. When you're at your max exercise, you still have 80% of all the ATP there. So you
Really?
barely decreased it.
Huh.
But the reason you have to stop though is because you have other metabolic waste products that build up, and that stops because if you were to continue depleting ATP, you would die very quickly because then you wouldn't be able to maintain your cell membrane potential and everything else. And so this is why it's you have to be able to have a high ATP flux or dynamic flux, basically. That's why having a high functioning mitochondria is really important so you can quickly provide ATP and enough ATP to maintain a whole bunch of organelles and cellular processes. So this is why somebody who is old and have all these health problems, if you actually measure their ATP levels, they wouldn't be much lower than that of a healthy individual. That's because if they were much lower, they'd be dead.
Gotcha.
But the cells are working so hard, or the mitochondria are working so hard to keep those ATP levels high. They don't have the ability to make ATP for other areas either, right?
Mm.
So I'm just trying to express the importance of the mitochondria is that helps to give you all this energy or all that
Mhm.
ATP that you need so you can maintain cellular function.
So did you do just to go back to did you do all of this research when you were in did you say Japan? When
Yeah,
you were in
Japan.
Japan? So you did all of this research, and then what? What happened after that?
Yeah, yeah. So going back to the story a little bit, so that was in 2013. I went to Japan, and then I just really want to continue researching molecular hydrogen because we're seeing these benefits, right,
Mhm.
in the research. And I then did my master's in exercise and sports conditioning, also, or I researched hydrogen gas for some athletic performance. And later I did my PhD researching hydrogen gas. My dissertation was in cardiovascular and cerebral vascular diseases,
Okay.
where we use hydrogen gas as a therapeutic. So I did my PhD in physiology. and just continue being part of this field really for a long time. And but then it comes to, okay, that's great. This is what the research shows, this is what we're showing. How do we actually provide hydrogen gas to people who want to try it?
Right.
Because in the laboratory, we would use tanks of hydrogen gas and we would dilute it down to 2% or 4% hydrogen gas. So it's not explosive.
Right.
And then we'd use it that way. But there wasn't any.
That's not like I can't have a tank of hydrogen gas in my house.
Yeah, exactly. You have to have a special license to do that because it's
Right.
explosive,
Right.
and it's a compressed cylinder as well, which can be dangerous on its own, right?
Right.
Yeah, so it's just not practical. And there were no machines that would on the market that would regulate the concentration of hydrogen gas between this 1 to 4% hydrogen
Okay.
therapeutic level. And so it was a number of years ago, actually, that my business partner, Alex Tranava, reached out to me and asked me about hydrogen inhalation.
Mm.
Now, you've probably heard of the hydrogen water tablets,
Yes.
maybe? So
Yes.
he's the inventor of the hydrogen water tablets. And
Okay.
so all the brands buy from him. And so he came to me basically saying, hey, we have the hydrogen water figured out. What about inhalation? How do you guys do it in the clinical studies and so on? And I explained to him how we do it, and it's not feasible. And so he asked if I'd basically consult to help develop a method or a way that people could actually get this molecular hydrogen for them therapeutically, right?
Got it. Got it.
And so I did that, and then we launched the company. I decided that I would join as a chief scientific officer and take a minority equity stake in the company, which is all my research before. I was just doing academic research. So I've never
Mhm.
endorsed a product or been part of a company before. It's just been focused on the research and doing my PhD and everything. So this has changed for me also, where we have this. But the fact is, now there is an opportunity where people who have various conditions or just want to have overall health and wellness, if they want to try this route, they can do it in the way we do it in the clinical studies. So
Wow.
they can
Okay.
ensure they get a therapeutic dose that's safe.
That's amazing. And they don't have to have they can have this in their homes or in their is
Right.
this just for physicians or is this and practitioners or is this something that people can do at their house?
People can do it at their house. I think we're primarily marketing towards physicians just
Mhm.
because they're the ones who should have the knowledge and they can decide whether or not it probably could be good for their patients.
Sure.
Um,
With
and so
testing too, I imagine that there's some testing protocols that come along.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Because we still are in the early stages of research, right? There's only
Mhm.
3,000 publications in total of molecular hydrogen, and then very few that are specific on this specific condition and getting this specific dose and what's going to be the best way. So we want clinicians to have this. But the beauty of this is because it's something so safe and it's so easy to use, we literally just put distilled water in the machine and push a button and that's it. So
And
a
that's
lot
it.
of most of our consumers are home-based users where they just have the machine and they just sit down and inhale hydrogen gas for 20 minutes to an hour or even all night,
Right.
whatever they would
So
like
tell
to
me
do.
let's this is so exciting. So tell me a little bit about what the technology actually the device looks like
Yeah. So
and how it
it's
works.
Yeah, so we can look it up. It's called
Okay.
inhaleh2.com is the website. So
Smart.
inhaleh2.com, it almost looks like almost one of the older Apple type computers, just the way it's look and feels like a very sleek look to it. What we do is you add distilled water
Mhm.
into the tank and then you do electrolysis of that water. So basically electrolysis decomposes the water molecule to hydrogen gas and oxygen gas.
Okay.
So now you have pure hydrogen gas that immediately gets mixed with HEPA filtered room air. So there's an air pump inside of it that takes their outside air, puts it and mixes it with the hydrogen gas. And
Okay.
so we filter that air, we mix it with the pure hydrogen gas immediately so that it's below the 4% range.
Okay.
And then this gas then goes into a reservoir bag. It's about a 3-liter reservoir bag and it's filled up and then that is then connected to a tube which connects to a face mask which you would inhale. And then
Wow.
when you take an inhalation, then that the air that you inspire, that you inhale, comes from that reservoir bag. And that way you know exactly what the concentration of hydrogen gas is.
Does
On
it
the
have a screen and it tells you what the concentration is so that it makes sure that it is at that safe range?
right. Yeah,
Wow,
so on the front, there's a little knob. You just push it and you just tell it what concentration you want. It goes from 1% to 4% basically.
amazing.
And you just choose 1.1, 1.2, all the way to 4%. And you choose that and then you just push go. And it
And is
immediately
there a
starts.
suggested amount of time, like, until the 3-liter bag is empty, or how does that work?
We would just recommend to do it for 20 minutes, 30 minutes at a
Okay.
time, because
Okay.
that's about how long it takes for the gas to dissolve into the blood and reach equilibrium and get into the mitochondria,
Great.
right?
Great.
But the reason why we have to have that 3-liter bag is when you take an inspiration just like that, even though it's just that half a second of that inhalation, just like you and I are sitting right here, when we take that inhalation, the speed that we're inhaling is between 30 to 60 liters per minute. That's how fast. So just as you take an
30 to
inhalation,
60 liters per minute. That's a lot.
yeah, and people don't realize how quick you are actually doing it. But you can imagine if you inhale about 10 liters in 1 minute, right, which
Mhm.
is average, that's a minute ventilation, right? So an entire minute, you're only going to inhale 10 or 12 liters or something. But you only do that when you're inspiring, when you during the inhalation phase.
Yeah.
You might only inspire for 15 seconds, 20 seconds in that minute. That means you have to get the entire 10, 12 liters in that 10 to 20 seconds.
Wow.
So you do the math on that, it's
Yeah.
very quickly.
Yeah.
So this is what largely also sets our technology apart from any other company on the market.
Okay.
Is there are other products on the market claiming to deliver molecular hydrogen, but they use a nasal cannula system.
Yes, I've seen those. I've seen
Yeah.
those.
And the problem with that is there's two big problems with that, or three, I can say. Number one is you may never get a therapeutic amount of hydrogen with that
Okay.
because in order for you to be therapeutic, it has to be above 1%. That okay, so we just need to remember that it needs to be above 1%. There are potential exceptions. We're just trying to keep this really simple.
Sure.
You typically want to be above 1%, ideally 2 to 4%. That seems to be closer to where most research is at. Okay. Now, if that cannula is only providing around a few hundred milliliters to a liter or even 2 liters of hydrogen gas per minute. But if you are, when you inhale, when you inspire, again, that could be between 30 to 60, even up to 100 liters per minute, just when you take that gasp of air.
Mhm.
So that's going to dilute that air from the nasal cannula down below 1%.
Because it's mixed.
Yeah, because
Because yeah,
you're
okay.
mixing with the outside air, right?
Gotcha.
So if you're at only 100 milliliters per minute and you're going to inhale at 100 liters per minute,
Mhm.
right? So that's 0.1 liters per minute. Anyway, you're like 0.1% is what I'm saying
Yeah,
there. It's not
yeah,
even therapeutic.
got it.
Okay. So
Does it so then so the mask controls the
mhm.
situation. That's what you're
Because
saying.
yeah, because when you take an inhalation from the mask, every breath that you take comes from inside the reservoir bag.
Got it.
It doesn't get diluted by the outside air. You have a reservoir bag that is precisely 2% or 4% hydrogen gas. So even if you just really fast like that, all of that just comes from that 3-liter bag, and the bag collapses as you inhale. So
Yeah.
it's always exactly that concentration.
Okay, got it. So more controlled, more controlled.
Yeah, so it can actually be therapeutic. Because the other problem is also if you have a deviated septum or
Mhm.
nasal congestion because you're sick or you're just a habitual mouth breather, you may never get a
The
therapeutic level.
full therapeutic level through your nose. Yes, I understand.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, this is not necessarily about the hydrogen that you're inhaling, but how does the face mask work with regards to your exhale?
Yeah, but it's a great question because when you exhale, the there's another there's two one-way valves in there. So when you inhale, all the air comes from inside the bag, but when you exhale, all the air goes out the top. So you
Ah,
never, the air never goes back into the back. So you're not rebreathing your
yeah,
same, or
yeah,
if you switch the mask with at a clinic or your house, you just switch the mask out, but you're never breathing the same air. It's always
got it,
fresh air that's been filtered,
got it,
right?
got it. Oh, this is fascinating. It's also I just had what is the movie? There's a movie where you can buy the canned air. It's kind of
Oh,
reminding me of that a little bit. Amazing. Okay, I love this because you're explaining it to me in a way that I can completely understand this, and I'm sure that clinicians and practitioners that are much smarter than me are understanding it even better. Okay, so it's a unit, it sits next to a comfy chair or something that you have, right? And you've put this face mask on and you're inhaling for the
mhm.
20 minutes or the 30 minutes. What are some testing protocols that you suggest for people if they are a clinician and they're listening? Are there some specific tests that you suggest so that they can actually measure the difference in the mitochondria function?
Yeah, and there's a lot of new mitochondrial tests that are becoming on the market. Some of them are not actually direct mitochondrial measurements, they're surrogate markers. People are free to try any of those. Their validity is still up for debate or question.
Okay.
But most people, clinicians, the people we've gotten feedback from anyway, is they put that machine in and they like to do not just solo therapy, but do combinational therapies. It stacks really well with other things. So
So, for
if you're
example,
yeah, so if you're doing like an IV, then while they're doing IV, they could also be inhaling hydrogen gas, or maybe they have they're sitting on a red light, like a mat or a bed or something. They
mhm,
could be doing that at the same time. PEMF, or maybe they're doing it as a pre-treatment before they do HBOT therapy or right after HBOT. This is really important because of how hydrogen gas sort of primes the cells and the mitochondria, so you can potentiate the benefits of other types of therapies
got
and
it.
mitigate potential harmful effects. So a lot of clinicians, they like to, if they come in, maybe it's if it's just a monotherapy, then they charge like $100 an hour
Mhm.
to inhale the hydrogen gas. And then if they want to combine it, then they could do with other therapies and it's like an add-on. So you have a really nice package that they can share with the customer and they can decide how they want to do it. And
That's great. That's great because I know there's a ton of our clinicians out there and a ton of our consumers that are
Mhm,
very interested in stacking products and stacking
mhm.
longevity devices, technologies, so that they can definitely get the best that they can out of these products. So that's fascinating. Okay. So then you've answered this, but maybe it seems to me that it's just this is fascinating to you, that this
Mhm.
hydrogen molecule and the therapeutic benefits of it are just fascinating to you. Are there any other stories of change or any other case studies that are helping your fascination? Because I see it, I saw it when I was at the conference. You were so excited about sharing this with other people. So help me understand a little bit about why. Are there some
Mhm.
specific case studies that help other people understand the true benefits?
Yeah, I try to be careful with some of these because we hear anecdotally
Sure.
some pretty powerful things, but there's still from the academic side of things, what does the actual studies show? And
Right.
so I try to temper my excitement by my ignorance at the same time. But
Sure.
so I'd largely like to just speak to I see from the scientific data,
Yeah.
right? What are these placebo-controlled randomized studies actually showing? And for example, there's an article in Lancet, it was eClinical Medicine, but they published the effects of inhaling 2% hydrogen gas following post-cardiac arrest syndrome. So basically, these patients would come in comatose, in a coma, and they would be randomized into either their standard therapy with or without hydrogen gas. And those that inhaled the hydrogen gas, they just did it for it was actually just one treatment for 18 hours. Okay. And then those that survived later they'd go home basically, but then they followed them up for 3 months to see how many survived in each group, right? And what was the neurological outcome? And
Mhm.
those that in the hydrogen that inhaled the hydrogen gas had was like a 20% increased survival compared to standard treatment alone,
Wow.
and also had improved neurological scores. This is a big deal because it wasn't a huge study, it was like 73 subjects, but you're getting a significant more people who actually lived in this study. Like this is like not an animal study. This was a human study who had a severe cardiac issue. They were given hydrogen gas, and those who were given it, more of them lived.
Wow.
And that's a pretty powerful thing, is a multi collaboration study, 10 different hospitals there in Japan. And we're seeing other really powerful studies that are corroborating some of the anecdotal reports
Hmm.
people hear with different conditions that they've struggled with for a long time, combine it with other mainstream therapies, for example, with an oncology support or something. And it can really help to move the needle. And it's exciting, especially with what we have to offer, because we're the only device that you can ensure that the patients are getting a therapeutic dose of hydrogen. And we've had a number of people tell us, like, they've had some patients respond well to hydrogen, other ones haven't. Then they've had other patients who don't respond well. They seem to do better when they give them a higher flow rates. And it all makes sense when you start realizing that people who with deviated septums and congestion in the way they're breathing may never have been getting a therapeutic amount with the lower
Right.
flow rates. So now
Right.
they are with the higher flow rates, but even a fraction of them will never get a therapeutic amount. And it could be too much, because in
Mm.
that Nature Medicine publication, I said they tested 2%. They also tested 4%, and 2% was more effective.
Interesting.
So with our machine, you can precisely tell it what you want. So maybe for a neurological situation, you want 2.3%, but
Mhm.
maybe another condition, you want 4%. And you can only do that with our machine. And then finally, you can do this without any risk to you or to the patient or to the clinic. I guess there's a number of reasons to be motivated, because number one, with a doctor, you want to do no harm.
Correct.
And there are a number of documented case reports where, especially in Japan, where people have been inhaling from these other machines with a nasal cannula and have had a spontaneous ignition, and has caused complex facial fractures
Oh my word.
or internal detonation in the airways, right? Vomiting blood, having to get rushed to the ICU. This is really dangerous. Hydrogen gas ignites in air easier than it does for a static discharge to occur. It
Wow.
takes less energy to ignite hydrogen gas in air.
Yeah.
And so it's something we have to be really careful with.
It's
And
safe. Yeah.
you don't need to be at high concentrations in order for it to be therapeutic.
Right.
The only reason why a high concentration, a high flow rate could be more effective, maybe that's the only reason. I'm trying to illustrate my point here, is with clinicians sometimes have noticed that higher flow rates are more effective.
Hmm.
And then they think therefore higher concentrations are more effective. But
Mm.
that's not necessarily accurate. The reason is often simply because those patients who weren't getting benefits before was because they had a deviated septum or never getting any. They were never reaching the 2% mark of hydrogen therapy. So a higher flow rate could get them. But they do so at a cost, at an
Mm.
increased cost of potentially having flammable substances in their nose.
My
And
goodness.
even lower flow rates is still a risk. If you put a nasal cannula with a hydrogen gas, your nose fills with hydrogen gas. And so any static discharge, anything, any amount of energy could potentially ignite that, and it could be very problematic, right?
Yeah.
And now with doctors, so you don't want to cause that to your patients, but also think about insurance claims, right?
Oh
Like,
yeah.
how could you even tell the insurance company, oh yeah, this is what happened? That violates every fire code in the building. You
Right.
technically that is I'm just saying it's breaking fire codes to have those machines in the buildings in the first place, right?
Yeah.
So this is why with our machine is so important for clinical research, because for us to get IRB approval in
Hmm.
universities and hospitals and major organizations, that you have to make sure it's totally safe,
Yeah.
and no other machine does that. And
Yeah.
and and that's why the major hospital studies, they don't use those machines. They use tanks of premixed gas, ensuring it's below 4%. So
Right.
it's
Right.
just fundamentally disingenuous for companies to be selling other products that, number one, they may never provide a therapeutic amount of hydrogen. You can't control the concentration or the dose, and you're introducing a risk, a serious potential risk to their
Right.
patients of causing real harm.
Oh
And
goodness. Goodness. That's scary. That's scary.
It is. Yeah.
Well, okay, so let's skip to another. This is, I think this question is going to be really exciting for me to hear what your answer is going to be, and for our listeners, because I think you might have a really big thing to say. So let's just move ahead in the future. Okay. What is your ideal, if you had the ability to wave a wand, what is your vision of the future of healthcare when it comes to root cause prevention or change, so to speak? When it comes to our future of healthcare, what do you think? What is your vision for that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I really believe that there are so many effective therapies that we miss out on because there's not enough financial incentive. And I think that if we can have better informed consumers and a better informed populations, then I think we can have more research dollars going towards researching these other therapies. Because right now, like a pharmaceutical drug, for example, it costs about $1 billion to develop a drug and get it all the way through FDA approval. And
Wow.
so that's a lot of money. And if you or I had an idea, we don't have $1 billion to develop that drug all the way through. And so these pharmaceutical companies, they're just a normal, in my opinion, they're just a company. And that company often doesn't have ethics or morals. Individuals might, but companies, they're not really bound by that. And
Mhm.
so it's just like, yeah, we could spend our money, another $1 billion on this, and maybe we could really help people. But there's no financial incentive to that. We would go
Right.
bankrupt. And so we need to have a better understanding publicly and politically and so on, where this, instead of having so much polarized fighting, where we're more united in allocating research dollars towards studying everything. And that includes these alternative natural therapies
Mhm.
and drugs themselves, because it's difficult. There are some drugs that are very effective, life-saving drugs, but other drugs that are probably should never have gotten approved, and it could be
Mhm.
really harmful. But it's difficult with all the conflicts of interest and different things to really, how are you supposed to know, right?
Right.
So I, for narrowing the question a little bit, this is one of the reasons why I am very passionate about molecular hydrogen. Is it's not because I know with any certainty that hydrogen gas is going to truly cure this disease or prevent this or do these things. Although the preliminary evidence looks very promising, I'm excited though because it's something that we have already established extremely high safety. If you have a healthy microbiome and a healthy diet, you naturally produce lots of hydrogen gas, probably 4 to 6 times less than your ancestors used to, because
Mhm.
of the change in the microbiome and the less fiber that you take. But over and over again, we see that higher fiber intake, higher amounts of hydrogen gas production, all of these correlates really well with improved health. And they've used hydrogen gas to prevent decompression sickness in deep sea diving since the 1940s. It's very high concentrations with no toxicity to the cells.
Right.
And now we're showing hydrogen gas is not only an inert microbial byproduct, but a biologically active signaling molecule that's directly improving the function of the mitochondria. And we're seeing this translating into true humans, clinical studies, but people with families and lives that they had improved outcomes. And so my passion really comes from the fact that there's a very high therapeutic index of molecular hydrogen. In other
Mhm.
words, the potential benefits are extremely high, whereas the adverse side effects are very low to non-existent.
Yeah.
And so this is something that I am very excited that more research is going towards this. And a lot of it, actually, most of the research to date has been funded by governments, by government organizations on hydrogen gas research. But because there's such a small awareness still about molecular hydrogen, is still a very small amount compared to what could be. So
Right.
I believe that when it comes to hydrogen, if the data continues to holding up, then I believe that hydrogen therapy can be one of the first things that can be used in mainstream healthcare, and it can radically revolutionize how we do medicine and emergency medicine,
Mm.
because we have molecular hydrogen as a tool for both the prevention and the treatment of these major conditions, both acute and chronic.
That is so fascinating. I recently had a situation happen where I witnessed someone that went into the emergency room, and almost every single time you go into the emergency room, they're going to start you on an IV with saline solution. And a lot of the times people can find that they improve pretty significantly depending on the situation, right? Just with that simple saline solution. So it's amazing to me to think about what you just said. And what if we went ahead and stacked that safely inhaled hydrogen at a dose that made sense for the situation? Oh my goodness, what kind of
Yeah.
outcomes we could have. That's incredible. I think it's a wonderful vision of the future. And of course, you're absolutely right. The funding needs to be there and the research needs to be there in order for these types of therapies that are
Mhm.
clearly helping people to get out in front of more eyes. I'm just really grateful for what you have done and everything that you have provided with all of your interest and all of your research to create a technology like this that can really be so very beneficial in a very very safe way
Yeah.
for the best outcome for people. So thank you for all of that, and thank you for your time. We will make sure that we get all of the show notes with all of the links to Inhale H2, and I'm certain that there's a way to get in touch with you if anybody has any questions, especially if they're clinicians and they would like to include this into their offerings
Mhm.
for their patients. So,
Yeah,
really, really
absolutely.
appreciate that.
Well, and thank you for this opportunity, and thanks for putting on that conference. And absolutely, I just want to echo what you said. Because hydrogen gas is safe, just like getting saline, it's safe, but
Mhm,
actually it does help a lot of people. We know that hydrogen gas is safe, and these preliminary data looks very promising. And
mhm.
there's no risk of the explosion and issues with other devices. Is something that can be added on, and especially when it comes to the stacking that we talked about,
Mhm.
because sometimes people stack things together and they actually negate each other or can be
Right,
too harmful.
right.
Hydrogen gas, because it's a modulator, it's an adaptogenic modulator, especially in the mitochondria, it is the best thing to stack with all of these things. And
Mhm.
clinicians absolutely do love this concept.
Yeah,
And I think as we continue, we will see more research. And I'm not just saying that. A lot of people talk about how we need more funding for this. We are doing the research. We're
right.
putting money into this and we're doing research. And I'm an academic researcher myself. So with my academic colleagues, and this whole movement is happening. And so I'm
So
not sitting
great.
around hoping that somebody will
He's gonna
get
show up with a
excited.
check.
Yeah, no, we are doing this,
That's
and
amazing.
I love that clinicians are getting on board with this because now they can provide a precise dose of hydrogen and we get their feedback and that drives more research. So
Absolutely.
absolutely inhaleh2.com and check that out when we people can use this for their patients. And then if people are interested in following some of my research and work, they can just look me up at Tyler W. LeBaron on all channels. And I post stuff on hydrogen as well as maybe some races or things that I've
Some
done
amazing things that
just for
you're doing
fun.
with your body.
Yeah.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much. We'll make sure to link all of that in the show notes below. Thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to having you guys at our next conference.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great one.
Bye.
That's a wrap for today's episode of the Change Life Destiny podcast. If you loved what you heard, share it with a friend and follow us for more bold conversations and breakthrough ideas. Ready to take the next step? Visit changelifedestiny.com to join the movement. See you next time, and keep diving in, learning, and leading the change.